Michael Windelspecht. Well, I messed up your name, Michael. Can you?
That's all right.
I apologize. Michael's here to talk to us. So we began a discussion with Michael on the last episode of Teacher Talk Live, all about publishing, and unfortunately, that conversation got cut short in our format of 1 hour. So I wanted to extend this time to talk more about Michael, because he's doing some great things and he can share some stuff with us as far as publishing and education is concerned that he'll definitely tell us more about. So Michael, go ahead and tell us what you got.
Great. So, we were talking on the session, the last time, we're talking a little bit about publishing avenues and things along those lines. And a lot of the people on the session were talking about self-publishing and, the self-publishing. And it's interesting because the world I'm in as a textbook author now, we are more and more publishing materials in the digital formats, okay? Trying to deliver things to students so they can access them by iPads and apps and things along those lines. And the world's really changing, and it's also offering some phenomenal opportunities for academics to start to get the material out there and start to do things differently than they used to before. Before you still had to basically publish a book and then convince somebody like Kindle, with Amazon and Kindle or Barnes and Noble or their Nook platforms to do something, and now you can almost self-publish, apps, or in my world is actually what they call cloud-based authoring, where you're authoring using a platform that is located up in the cloud, and so basically that's one of the things that I'm really spending a lot of time with now, and it's something I thought we could definitely talk about today.
So
those avenues for those authors.
Right. So how different is it? You're saying, like, if someone wanted to publish a textbook or a nonfiction text that can be used in education, they would just take the chance and create something and then shop it around. How much has that evolved, and what are the steps that are available to educators now?
That's a great question. So the textbook world is pretty small. There's not a lot of people who are in it. I write books for the sciences, and there's probably, you can count on two hands the number of authors who are probably involved with that process. And there's lots of good ideas out there, and lots about people who want to be able to publish their own work, okay, and or for their classes maybe, or maybe they have a specialty project, maybe they teach something that is not a mainstream course, for example, that they want to go ahead and get their ideas out there. And if the big publishers are obviously going to want to publish things that are going to generate income and lots of ideas, and yet the academics sometimes want to publish things very small. And so initially things like Kindle and platforms like that allowed you to start to put things together to send out there. But nowadays, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to integrate multimedia. Let's just say I go to Belize with one of my co-authors. I try to go once a year down there, and we've talked a lot about building a book, which is some sort of thing talking about the educational opportunities in Belize. This is something I'd love to build, and I'm not sure that it has a huge market out there. There's not a lot of people using it. I think it would be a great book, but in order to make this book come alive, I want to be able to integrate media inside of it. I want to take not just photos, but I want to put videos of howler monkeys. I want to put videos of jaguars and tours and stuff and embed it inside of it. And historically, that was not really available to authors. They had to build a companion site, and if you're interacting with the book, then you'd read the book, and then you turn around and have to go over to the companion site and watch the video on the YouTube site. Now what you want to do is you want to put everything in one spot. And one of the companies that I work with that does this is Inkling is a big one. Atavist is another one. There's a lot of these companies that are out there that you can build something that has a strong multimedia presence to it, and that's just amazing. So you're not only getting the ability to put your work out there, but you're also getting the ability to take your properties and put them inside that product.
Right, right, right. So explain to me how that works. Like, say if I have, if a book that you publish, uh, I can have it on the iPad or whatever, or tablet or something like that. And um, as you are on that trip to Belize, you update a new video or something like that. My book also gets an update as well.
Right, so that's what we're moving towards. Okay, that's really the power of what's happening here. So the interesting thing about the textbook world, I've been writing textbooks for a while now, is you finish writing something like something like this. You finish writing it 6 to 8 months before it actually gets published, right? So and yet science is an unbelievably dynamic field. So what happens is, of course, is something you finish writing, and sure enough, somebody makes a discovery, and your book was obsolete before you ever published it, right?
Right,
So,
right.
I always use, discussions about, genetics, for example, or even physiology now, or medicines. In the past, you had to be very careful about what you put in the books because you knew they had to exist in a world for 3 years before you came around to a revision of it. We're getting closer and closer towards the continuously updated textbook, and that's my passion right now. I think in the current world, what would happen is that you would download, say, a copy of my Belize book, for example, and let's just say I could push a second edition, and then you would have to download the second edition. But I think what we're getting with these books is, especially in the academic world, is to have it so it almost is the same thing as an app. So what'll happen is you will log into a platform, and you'll go, oh, okay, and you'll go in and you'll say, oh, there'll be a little icon saying, look, Michael's pushed out 3 updates on his book, and you kind of go, yep, install, and you hit the button, and it
Oh,
downloads
nice.
onto you. And imagine what that's going to do to education, right? I
Okay.
mean, imagine your ability to change the textbook on a regular basis based upon what is happening in the world around you. History professors, something occurs somewhere in the world and they want to update it. Science, language, they go to a different location, they shoot some videos of people talking, and they say, oh, we want to put these in the book. I mean, we're going to have these textbooks which are going to resemble apps more and more, I think, where you're going to be able to download that type of content. And if I was an academic, a new academic who wanted to publish, and we can talk about this more if you want, I would start to think about collecting my assets as, in the next couple of years, maybe not even years, maybe months for all we know, these things are going to come online pretty quickly. So if I'm thinking about a book proposal now, I need to stop thinking about the idea that I'm just going to go ahead and type out X number of words, and I'm going to go get an illustrator to put the stuff together. I need to start thinking, can I get some videos? Can I get some animations? Can I get some graphics to put in there? And then how am I going to update this thing 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, 18 months down the line? I think that's really it's cool.
So more of a more rounded feel to it, as far as information, just like everything else, just constantly evolving. So therefore,
Yes.
there's always new ideas and new material to add to it. And as far as advances, not only advances but also new approaches to something as well that you could implement that wasn't there before. Is all this similar to? Are you talking more of the idea of something I've been hearing more about is books as apps?
I think that's where we're going. I think you're going to start to blur the line between the idea of what an app is, okay, and more of the technology of the app. Okay, the app has been a phenomenal advance in the way that we receive information. And I don't watch the news anymore. I have a BBC app on my phone, and I pick and choose what news I want to see, and I scroll through and I hit, and if I want more, I can go to their website.
Right.
I can also watch videos, and I think we have to take that towards. And I know some people, like from our previous discussion, are already building those apps. We have to kind of take that to the textbook world. In the K-12 world, which you're familiar with, some schools buy books, and they may not buy another set of books for 10 years, or 5 years because of financial issues, right? And yet those books are we want those books to be updated. So I think it's gonna change. That's the way we're looking at it, and the app has shown us that we can make rapid changes to content relatively quickly. I mean, if you're anything like me, my iPhone appears every other day to have 5 apps that need to be upgraded. You know,
Right.
so I think your textbooks are going to move in that direction as well. You know, I don't know if it's going to work quite as much for the fiction side of things, but it might. I mean, they may be able to build some really cool. The site Atavist has a lot of people who are building fiction books that have videos and things like that in it. You know, it's kind of delivered. That's really kind of a neat process for them.
That's really interesting. Michael, do you think that this whole authoring world is heading in a similar direction to the way video entertainment has gone, as far as television and you know, with the Netflix, Amazon Primes of the world and all that stuff, that everything has become, you know, the 4 networks are, you know, slowly dying.
Yeah.
Is it becoming similar with books? And do you think that?
Well, it's still okay. So I think in order to produce something that is, I think you're right. It's heading in that direction. I don't think that it still costs a lot of money to produce a textbook. Okay, you know, they're not. If anybody finds out, you just can't grab images off the web and put them in there. You just can't. I can't take your video and put it in my textbook and you just say, oh, yeah, by the way, Oscar, I put your video in my textbook. You're going to think, well, no, you don't own that, Michael. You know, so there's still a lot of content that has to be generated and put together. And the publishing companies, big and small, are very good at that. They understand that. Compliance issues, ADA compliance. I mean, these things, you know, there's a lot of editorial work, photo permissions researching. You know, all these things are very elaborate processes, which the big publishers. So that's still going on. But I think that the idea of a textbook that that you and I traditionally consider to be this reference thing is quickly disappearing. I think what you're going to be able to do is, as a teacher, let's just say I'm a biology teacher and I want to teach. I have a special class coming up. I'm going to be able to very, very soon, I think, okay, start to assemble content as I want to. So I'm going to grab content and move this piece here and move this other piece here and move this other piece here in a train car mentality. And as I do that, I'll be able to drag all the assessment, the videos, you know, everything is going to assemble around this thing, right? Okay.
Right.
So basically, you would self-assemble your textbook.
Right. It's sort of it makes me think of a more rudimentary thing of what you're thinking. But there's, I don't know if you're familiar with the website Learnist.
Yes.
Yeah, it's sort of like that, but I know you're talking on a bigger scale, but sort of like that, where you organize your, you know, you want your video for this lesson and you want the this article, this other article, and you put it together in one stream.
Right.
And then you go from there.
Right.
You know, yeah. So I can see how it is heading that way. It's a pretty interesting. It just seems like a lot is changing right now, and it's
changing very fast. And I think that in our previous session, we heard a lot about some of the struggles people went through to get their book out there, how they were rejected 15 times, and you know, or more. You know, and for what are wonderful books. I actually was inspired by that talk. You know, and went and looked at some of their books that are out there, and they look really great. And imagine if, as an author, you'd be able to put together your content in the way that you want it and get it out there, and then, you know, of course there's always the danger that things which aren't very good get out there, but YouTube has shown us how the general public will usually pick, you know, things that are better get moved to the top and things that aren't going to move down, you know, in the big scheme of things. And just, you know, all the junk's still out there, but you know, if you put a good product out there, you can move higher up the rankings and ratings.
Right. Yeah, I think that can really happen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I've been having technical issues, and I'm trying to make sure that the audience doesn't hear it. Okay. So so my wondering I'm having is how does this all affect the big publishers? And I know you're involved with one. how does this affect them, and how are they doing something about it as far as controlling any of it? And do they stand in the way of people who want to create something? Say, if you were just completely independent and you had all these ideas for a biology book, um, how does that fit in, I guess?
Right. I think it's a good question. I think there's a couple parts to this. I think, I work for a very large publisher. Obviously, I'm an author for them, and I have a number of books with them and things like that. But I think that they're honestly encouraging this types of mentality. They're encouraging the development. Most of the major publishers are the big ones, and there's only about 3 or 4 of these massive ones that are left. Right. They seem to recollate around other things, but they're encouraging. They're actively in the development field for this. They see it coming. And I think that in many cases, people, the big publishers, look for faculty members who are interested in these technologies. One of the things that I do for the publisher I work with is I work as basically a digital consultant, and I periodically have meetings with them and talk to them about the same things we are. This is, as an educator, where I would like to see things go, and as an author, where I'd like to see things go. And I have not found that they've blocked it, or they've made. I think I think they've actually encouraged the conversations. If you go to the big education meetings, the EDUCAUSES, the DevLearns, and things like that, you'll see that the big publishers are encouraging people to think differently about content, which is encouraging. Okay, I don't think that 10 years ago that necessarily would have happened. So I'm not sure they feel threatened, any more than most major companies feel threatened. I think that they're looking for academics who are interested in doing these types of things, who are interested in not just, if you go to them and say, I want to produce a book, right, one of these things, they're going to, I think the first words out of their mouth are going to be, what else can you make with it? Tell me how this is going to be different in the digital world. And if you say, well, I've got video footage, and I've got examples, and I've got interviews, right? If you just say you were, something like this, where you were making an ed tech book, and you say, well, I've got interviews with people who are experts in the field, now they're going to start to listen, because now you have something to bring that's going to be a digital content to them. And I think they're very encouraging of that. At least in my part of the world, they are, and the people that I interact with, they've been very responsive to different discussions I've had with them.
So they're keeping up with the times, and they're looking for a more multimedia approach.
I think they're driving it. I think that they have the, me personally, okay, if I had to go out and produce, 20 videos that covered the span of a textbook, that's not easy. You know it. Producing a talk show probably isn't easy to get everything together, and to make something that's quality. And I can't bring the resources of a National Geographic or BBC or PBS or Howard Hughes Medical Institute. I can't do that type of stuff as an author, but the big publishers can partner and set up these things where to help authors out. I think that they're actually encouraging the move in this direction. I think that they know that the delivery of content over an iPad is really, or eventually, of course, a phone, right? A phone. Although there's been some obstacles with that, because most phones are not easy to read large amounts of text on, but the iPad at least has been really interesting.
Yeah. So, Michael, I don't know if you can speak on this, if you're familiar with this experience, but I remember in college how big the textbook world was, and how just frankly just really expensive it was, because you would go buy a $200 book, and then they would sell it back for like $30. Yeah. And that sort of thing. How does that play into this? Do you?
Well, remember, I'm not a financial person for any publisher, okay? So I can only speak to this as being an author. But so if a publisher goes out, and we talked about this before, if they have to invest, let's just say they have to invest $1 million in building a book, right? And that's not unreasonable for photos and everything, and videos and rights and everything. And if they can only sell 10,000 books, well, then they have to be able to get their money back for it, right? And so what happens is there's a large number of books out there in the used book market, okay, and students, it's like buying a car. If I buy a secondhand car, the people who made the car never get the original money for it. It's not paid backwards. So I think what you're going to see is that if they move to the digital world, they're going to be able to bring the prices down. And I've already kind of seen a little bit of this, where the prices to the students start to come down because you're not trying to produce something that has a cover to it and paper to it and has to be shipped and stored. And also, if you can get the price down, then more of the students will buy the original product, especially if it has the other things with it. And I'm saying, I'm not a marketing person. I'm just a science author. But in my mind, I think what you're going to see is a drop in those prices, just like how when other industries have been disrupted, you've seen the price start to collapse back downward a little bit. And I think it's going to make it easier for people to get things. I personally also like the idea of of what I call the iTunes model. So instead of buying my book up front and not knowing what the instructor is going to cover, that I should be able to go in and say, the instructor is saying, okay, you only have chapters 7 through 10. You go on and go, okay, chapter 10, okay, and I'm charge my card, okay, and then I've got that information. And I think that they're moving. There's been some attempts to do that, but to move it so that it builds with all the videos, the assets, and stuff like that. I think that there's some really good learning apps out there where you buy modules as you need them, some language learning apps and things like that. So you finish a section in a language, and then you say, oh yeah, I want to do the intermediate. I gotta go buy another $10 section, and so I go in there, I charge my card, and I get $10 more worth of content to me, right? And I don't know this because I'm not in the mindset of the big, I'm not. Like I said, I'm an author, but I think that that's where we're going to have to go. That model has been very successful in so many other industries, right?
Well, and I think also, one thing to consider as well is reputation overall, because if everyone is producing content, there's just an information overload, right? And some information is wonderful, some information is intermediate, and some information is just wrong.
Right.
And so and so there's gonna have to be some kind of gatekeeper or some kind of way of detecting quality over quantity.
If you remember the early days of Wikipedia. Okay, the very early days when people were, you and I can write a Wikipedia article on anything, right? It didn't make any difference what it was, right? Or even if we knew anything about it, we could just write. There was a lot of academics who said, and professors who said, we don't want you to use Wikipedia, and yeah, there's still a little bit of a problem with it, but Wikipedia has really gone to these, people watching things and moderating, and I think that's the publishers do that very well. I can't write anything in a textbook without it being reviewed by 25 people, and trust me, they will tell me if I have something that's not correct. Okay, if you're gonna be a textbook author, you better have a very thick skin, okay, because they're gonna come after you all the time. But it's a great process. It helps you understand it. I think you're going to have that if you're going to have a textbook for a certain state, or that's going to adopt in the K-12 world, or do we know that content is vetted and protected and things like that, and is reliable, obviously, is what I was getting at there. And that's a part of the process. And of course that adds a little bit of expense to it too. People have to come in and review and stuff. But I think that you're right. That's in the education world. We want to know that our content is reliable for what we need it to be.
Right. So is it possible for an author to create something on a platform like Kindle or Ibooks, and I guess depending on what rights they have to be able to transfer it to one of the big publishers? I don't know about that process, but I'm going to say I don't know the legal aspects of how. There's so many of these little entities out there. I don't know what they're legal. I used to work with a very small publishing house, okay, and basically what happened was the fact that when I wrote something for them, they had the right to publish it, and I could not simply just take that same content and put it into some other format. Okay, that was the way that thing was built at the time. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take something and rewrite it. I mean, if it's science, can't you rewrite it and do something different? But they basically had the right to publish that. I'm not sure how that works. I would suggest that the people be very, very investigate that of what they're trying to do. I don't know how iBooks and
all these different platforms work.
Yeah.
As a textbook author, it's pretty clear that when I write something, who owns it? Okay. And let me tell you something. It's not me. Okay.
Right.
So,
but there's a little bit of comfort in that you don't,
exactly. I don't know. I mean, there is. Okay. But I think that the idea, you're on the right idea here. That people have to look at that type of thing. But I would also use it. Authors can get their ideas out there and use it as a product to show major publishers. I think that some of the people in our previous discussions and some of your others that were on there, and some of the Twitter conversations were coming in. People don't necessarily always want the big publisher. They don't want it. They want to retain the rights to everything, and so these smaller platforms may provide a lot more flexibility for them to get their stuff out there. And then maybe somewhere down the line, a major publisher says, well, would you write a similar type product for us, right? And not necessarily just go get it and bring it over. But you could, I imagine. That's not the way that's not the world I work in, but I imagine it could happen.
Right, but because I think you're right. I think probably both can coexist, because you have your classroom teachers, whether it's elementary, high school, and even college ones that have a particular niche or a particular thing they're doing that is mainly for their students, and they can create that content independently, I guess,
right.
and expand it in a different way for a major publisher if it wants to go nationwide, or so that it can.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's the right idea. That what you got, what you're saying as far as that.
Right. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of different avenues, and you've got to ask why you're doing something, right? I mean, if I'm doing this, most of the time, the reason why teachers build something is they want to build something for their students, right?
Right.
And yes, of course, if it can pay for something, that would be great. Okay. I'm not naive.
Yeah, that would help.
People want to be paid, but often, when we talk on the other session, the passion is getting their stuff out there. Okay. And historically, that was blocked. Okay. You had to, but now there's these avenues, and I think it's about to open back up again. I think the small publishers, the small textbook publishers, linked with Amazon and allowed a lot of things to get out there. Now we're about to go into this new open, the cloud-based publishing, authoring world, the ability to use platforms that publish across multiple. There's platforms out there now which will publish things that you can publish in I don't know about Ibooks, but I know that Kindle and Nook at the same time, and automatically formats it. So there's some really neat things out there for that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, just to announce it, and maybe you can watch in 3 hours from now, we're actually having Bradley Metrock come on to talk about iBooks specifically. So
great platform.
Yeah, they're having a conference in Tennessee coming up, and so it'll be interesting to hear. He's talking about a lot of changes that have happened in the iBooks world, in the way that things are published. So it's kind of an exciting thing as well.
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, there's a lot of good platforms, and I don't want to, I'm not endorsing,
Yeah, one or the other, yeah.
But I would think that there's a lot of these out there, and iBooks is up there, like I said, Atavist, Inkling, okay, there's a lot of these good ones that are there, and they're each one has a little bit of a different flavor to it. That's just it. You get a little bit of something different to it, and so it would be, it'd be very useful to talk about that, to get together a group of people and talk about their experiences with iBooks.
Yeah. It should be good. I actually got I downloaded the authoring software and created a template of this little book that I wanted to make. I just never carried through with it to actually get it published.
You should.
Yeah. So that might be an outcome of this coming conversation.
I think it's a great. I mean, if nothing else, it helps you get your ideas together. It helps you build things around it. I've seen people build stuff, books around videos. If you have a good collection of videos here, you can say, well, there could be a small book, a small book associated with this that provides additional resources and things along those lines. Right. The publishing world is changing. I think we have to stop even thinking about the word book, because the app world has changed things, and the cloud publishing, and like I said, the ability to train car these things together is going to change the way we look at content completely.
Yeah, yeah, and it's amazing. It's just, it makes me want to go back to the classroom and do some publishing and get it out there, you know. So it's a really cool, exciting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Michael, you know, can you I know we talked a little bit about inspiration and all that stuff. Tell me more about how, because I'm interested in how your process began of authoring, and how you got your, you know, now you're a textbook publisher and educator as well, but how that all got started, and how you know, teachers with ideas that they have that don't come to fruition because,
Right.
you know, the insecurities, the self-doubt and that kind of thing. So how did that fit in with your process and your story, the self-doubt and all that?
Well, I think you always have, you know, a little bit of self-doubt whenever you're putting yourself out there. I'm sure you feel the same way. You know, you're putting your, you know, your idea out there. You know, I had taught for a number of years. I realized, like a lot of your
Hello, Michael. Michael seems to be frozen.
Interestingly, I didn't start off coming into this as a writing person. I came into this process because I was using, I was trying to do different technologies in the classroom. I was building early online courses. I was at a school in the University of Georgia system. I had just come to Appalachian State. I was working with a lot of different ideas about how to do things in the classroom, how to engage students. And I started really getting involved more with digital products. And I became what they called early on a digital author, okay, which meant that really what I did is I worked on digital products for them. I became the person who wrote questions from behind the scenes. I became the person who helped develop narrations for videos and things along those lines. So I really, even though I always had this idea I was going to be a writer, in the academic world, I really spent more time doing digital work. At the same time, okay, I was very, very lucky. I'd be honest with you, I responded to an advertisement for authors to write a book on technology in the 17th century, and I was rejected. Okay, so it makes you feel better. Okay, I think I was rejected several times, but finally the editor called me and said, you know, Michael, we really have an opening. Would you like to give this a shot? And this was one of these little 75,000 word reference books at the time, and I wrote it, and I realized I really enjoyed it, and it was brutal writing it because I did, you know, the process, and then they gave me another one, and then another one after that. So I was doing this kind of small scale writing on the side, but my passion was in the digital world. I think I'm trying to remember exactly when, but I went to a conference once, okay, and one of the big publishing companies was there, okay, and it's actually not the one I was working at now. Okay, it was one of the big publishing companies that was there, and in a conversation we had at one of their booths, they took one of my cards, okay, and somebody must have written something on the back of it, and I started to get more and more and more involved, and then I kind of shifted publishers and did the same type of thing for my current publisher, where I became a digital author. And there's a huge need for people out there who are digital authors, who are willing to basically write things that aren't necessarily a book, but are narrations and all these other things that have to be done. Right. And eventually, I gathered the attention of an editorial group and moved into my current role. You know, so nice. I don't think there is a traditional style to these. I think you have to keep pushing it all at any door. I joke, I tell people all the time, if there's a door and it's shut, push on it, okay? Because it may look like it's shut, but it may not be locked, okay?
Right,
so you got to push on that door, and sometimes you go through, and sometimes it doesn't move, okay? If it doesn't move, try a different door. That's all I can tell them. And
a lot of the times, it's just creating your own whatever it is it's going to be. Like your story is for the through the traditional route, you know, going through a big publisher. But when you can't get in the door somewhere, I think, you know, you create something. That's my story with this show. Is just that I I thought after 15 years, I've been a classroom teacher long enough. Why don't I go into different facets of education? And so I knocked on a few doors, but there wasn't the exact position or the exact this or the exact that I would fit into a frame. And so the whole idea behind this is, wait a minute. I want to talk about education. I want to help educators and make them grow and have a conversation around education and how to make it better instead of just whining about the bad things going on, you know?
Right.
And so that's how this was born. And it's like, you know, the same thing with authoring and technology. It's like the technology's there to do whatever you wish, and the contacts are there because there's the whole Twitter world. There's just so many avenues to get your message out there, and you know, and here we are. So
right. I mean, you know, we have a connection now, which 10 years ago would probably have never happened.
Right.
Okay. Or even 5 years ago. And it's I think you're absolutely right. You've got to, if you have to have a passion to produce something that you want to get out there. That has to be the number one thing. You have a passion for that.
Right.
And the second thing is you have to be willing, like I said, to push up against doors and see which one's going to pop open and which ones don't. And just because one of them doesn't mean you're done. Just keep at it. I mean, the success of the previous panel I was on, you know, all of them had a story by which they kept telling you that their book, they never thought that this would get published.
Right.
And every one of them has a very successful book and a great story behind it. And I'm sure their students respond tremendously to if you think about it as a teacher, okay, once you decide to put yourself out there and do these things, I think you become the better teacher. I think that you become the better person. You become, you're putting yourself out there to the world to say, this is who I am, okay? And I think that's right. And another thing you said, which I really agree with, I want to make sure, is we always hear about what's wrong with education. There is so much that's right with it. And in my mind, that so much that's right with it is the teachers.
Right.
Okay. No matter what's going on in this world with financing and everything else like that, okay, the teachers, they have that passion. And the ones who are publishing and doing those types of things and putting themselves out there are just really the ones you look at and say, that's a phenomenal passion.
Yeah, and just being able to get it done, you know, no excuses, just get it done, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And the whole idea of you were talking about self-publishing and that sort of thing, is that I remember just 2 years ago, well, actually about a year ago, in the classroom, and I had created a new video to teach them about long division. And so I created this video in which I was doing a voiceover, and I appeared in parts of it and that sort of thing. And it just drew their attention, just like, wow, like, you know, these are third graders. And so they were like, wow, so you're famous?
Right.
Guys, I'm not famous. I have a camera. I wanted to create this for you so that you'd have another way of learning what I already taught you, you know.
But you made a connection with them, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. I've taught for a long time, and I'm very lucky. You know, I own a multimedia production company, you know, that produces my own materials. We have our own YouTube channels, and I also work with very talented instructional designers in my own in this company, and we produce a whole series of videos. You know, these are not going to be the top. You're not going to see these at the start of YouTube as, you know, the #1 hit. But it's little things like, you know, how to convert things in the metric system. You know, what are the basic characteristics of life. You know, but because I saw a need for my students, they weren't getting it on a typical diagram, and so we said, well, let's make this come alive a little bit. And you're right, and you make that connection, and your students respond, and I don't know. It made me a better teacher.
Right.
And then think it through from their perspective.
Right, and in the math and science especially, it seemed to make a big impact because, you know, especially in math, you have things that you're trying to teach them that they don't necessarily learn it one way. And so there's more, and I always tell my students this, there's more than one way of explaining a math problem or a math concept. So I can teach it to you 5 different ways, but then there's a video that teaches it to you like a totally different way.
Right.
You know, and there might be an iBook as well that teaches it, that was created by a student that understands it, that is taught in his own way.
Right.
You know, and so I think the availability of those resources and multimedia resources are just a huge advantage to learning.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. There's no book that says, and I'm sure there is. Okay, there is no book that says this is the way people learn. Okay, because we all learn differently, and I know that, you know, I'm not talking about learning styles. The situation you're in, whatever that is at that point in time, you're going to learn things different ways, but depending upon what you're trying to learn and how you're trying to learn it. Some people will say, I'm a visual learner. Well, it depends on what you're doing. Okay, what the context is, you know, because some things aren't visual, okay, and some things are going to have different responses. But you're right, and I think that the neat thing about YouTube, you know, and the way we're going digitally is that to be able to assemble those things together and put them into, you know, the way we want them to be. And the changes in the publishing world are going to make that easier and easier to put those things together.
Yeah, yeah. It's an exciting world.
It is. It is.
Well, Michael, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to go over?
No, I think we really went over this.
Okay.
I think that there's a lot of exciting things. I wanted to make sure when you and I first, you know, talked afterwards that, you know, there's a lot of avenues out there for people which are not following these traditional pathways of how to do things. And I think that there's a lot of really positive things for academics and anybody who's watching this, but especially teachers, obviously, to get their ideas out there and try to do something just a little bit different. And who knows, you know, if you were to tell me 10 years ago that I would be a textbook author, I would have laughed and said, you know, I'm happy, you know, doing this, and I did not stop. I just kept going and exploring new opportunities and keep learning and trying new things, and some of them worked, and, you know, and some of them didn't work. You know, but you learn from them and say, okay, I'm not going to use that anymore. I'm going to try to use this, you know, and so it's been really educational for me.
But it's the perseverance, and the same thing that we tell our students, you know, you keep going at it. It's not something that you just tell the students and not believe in, you know, yourself.
You have an idea, keep working at it to try to make it work. And I would say that to anybody who's trying to publish something right now, and don't necessarily think I need to get the big publisher's attention. Get your work done, get it out there to the world, okay, and then take the next steps after that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, nice. This has been a nice talk. I really appreciate you coming on, and just stay on after, and so we can chat a little more.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I appreciate your help. Thanks for coming on.